friends. Hello, 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 and Happy New Year. This is Rebecca, your friendly neighborhood dragon librarian from Farmington Community Library, and I'm here with my good friend Brill today for a very, very exciting video. In fact, it's one of my favorite videos of the year to film, and that is my top 5 favorite adult books that I read in 2024. Now, this whole month of January, I'm going to be talking about some of my favorite books. Now, I read a lot. I read a lot of books, a total of 375 to be exact. So because of that, it was very hard, obviously, to pare down like what were my favorite ones. So this whole month, I'm going to be talking about different groups and different genres of books and which ones I love the most. So the ones I'm going to talk about today are going to be the top 5 regular fiction, literary fiction books that I read this past year. Okay. The rest of the month, I'm going to be talking about my top 5 favorite thrillers, my top 5 favorite fantasy and sci-fi, and also my top 5 favorite romance books. So today we're just basically talking about regular literary fiction, stories like that, okay? Another thing I want to say before I get started is obviously this is a very biased selection of books, right? These are things I read personally that I really enjoyed. I didn't take anything off of other like lists or whatever of winners for the year, but it's very personal because they're books I read that I loved. So maybe there's going to be books on there that you're like, I cannot believe she loved that book so much. I have another list of 5 books that I think are the best. Or you're going to say, well, why didn't I see this book on your top 5, list of favorite books? And that's okay. And I love that because one of my favorite things in the entire world, obviously, is talking about books with people, right? So I want to know all about your top 5 favorite books. Please tell me in the comments, what are some of the books you read this year that you can't stop thinking about, can't stop talking about, can't stop recommending to people? These are my top 5. I'm going to give you just very, very brief little synopsis of them and then let you know why I love them so very much. Okay. So we're going to start at number 5. Okay. Counting down from 5, right? And that's going to be We Burn Daylight by Bret Anthony Johnston. I'm sorry. We Burn Daylight. Now, just a quick little humble brag here. I got a early edition of this book, our advanced reader's copy, back in the spring, and it came out this summer, near the end of summer. And so I got to read it a little early, which I was really excited about. And I am the kind of person that if I get a book for free early ahead of time, I'm going to read it no matter what it is. So I didn't go in with any expectations, but I really loved it. And this might not have been a book I would have picked up otherwise, because it's not about a topic that I generally find very interesting or captivating, but I'm glad I did because it was phenomenal. So We Burn Daylight is basically a retelling of the Waco situation that happened in 1990s. Okay. So I say it's a retelling because it's very, very close. It's an account of, obviously it takes place in Waco, Texas, and it doesn't name the person who is the cult leader is not the same person. The story is different in that way, but it is basically, it follows every other thing very, very closely. So if you're familiar with the story, the historical story of that, obviously you're going to be able to follow along. If you're not, it doesn't matter because they tell you what's happening anyway. So basically this is like a modern day Romeo and Juliet, because what happened in Waco, Texas is basically there was this cult leader who had this commune, and there was this huge standoff between him and the commune, who had a lot of guns, versus the police presence outside of the town. And it was a very tense, horrible situation between the two sides. Now, all that is true. What isn't true is the fictionalized characters that come out of this. Like the cult leader, obviously they name him something different. It's not the same person. But the big story behind this is the story within the story. And that is the daughter of one of the cult members and the son of the police chief, and how they have fallen in love, how they met, the desperation, that first love automatically is just desperate and just like, right? But when you add in the fact of like the doomedness of between them, like, oh my gosh, like really fantastic. I loved the writing in this. I thought it was absolutely phenomenal. The author did a really, really great job balancing out the voices, like the two teenagers who have fallen in love versus like, the adults that are on either side. And also what's happening in this book, which is very interesting, is there's a documentary being filmed or, recorded in present time that's talking to some of the survivors of the events. So you're finding out the story in two ways. It's giving the flashbacks of what happened, but you're also hearing the accounts of people who lived afterwards and are now are talking about it. So it's a very fascinating, interesting book. Again, I don't think this is a topic that you need to necessarily like be interested in or care about. Again, I didn't know anything about the Waco, the Waco thing that happened other than just the bare bones of it. And I thought it was a fascinating story. I thought it was phenomenally done, very well written. The characters were just incredible. And I loved it. Fantastic book. Number 5. Okay, number 4. Interesting Facts About Space by Emily Austin. Now, Emily Austin is now a auto-buy author for me. Okay, her first book that came out was called Everyone in This Room Will Someday Be Dead. So you can kind of get the idea of her sort of style of writing, which is a dark humor, okay? She likes to write about very flawed characters, but make them really human and lovable at the same time, so that you can look at this character and be like, oh God, what is happening? What are you doing? And at the same time being like, I just want to give you a hug. I'm so sorry that these things are happening to you, and I just want to make it better for you. And that is exactly what this book is too. It's her second book, and is about a woman named Enid, who is obsessed with space. She loves space. She loves talking about facts about space. And she's also very interested in true crime. She listens to true crime podcasts all the time. That's like her comfort audio material that she listens to. And she's also she's terrified of bald men. She has this really random, weird phobia about bald men that she tries to keep hidden because it causes her a lot of anxiety. She has a lot of anxiety about a lot of different things, but particularly bald men. So while she starts this new relationship with this girl she really likes, she is convinced she is being followed and stalked by this bald man. And as this continues to happen, she begins to unravel a little bit more and more until she gets to the nitty-gritty of herself and, what is going on with her. So this is definitely a character-driven story, right? It sounds like it's very heavy, and it is, but it's also very, very funny. I laughed so hard reading this book because it's dark humor, right? So it's about a human's flaws. It's about everything that makes them who they are and loving them anyway. I loved Enid so much. I was rooting for her. I thought she was amazing. If you are a person that really loves character-driven stories, particularly ones with dark humor, Interesting Facts About Space. I read this in January last year, and I still think about it very frequently. I loved it so much. Emily Austin. Okay, number 3. I guarantee you this is a book, if you haven't read it, you've at least heard of it. The Women by Kristin Hannah. Now, I know this is like a really, really popular book. It was on all the bestseller lists. It was on all the, we had like 85 billion holds on the book. It was impossible to get when it first came out. I have to talk about it anyway. It had to make my top 5 list because I just absolutely adored this book. Now, Kristin Hannah, I just want to say, I've read most of what she's written, and I love all of it. She is such a remarkable author. She can take a topic of which I don't know anything about or even think I care about that much and make it the most fascinating thing in the world. The Four Winds was about the Depression and the Dust Bowl era, right? I didn't know or care anything about that, and I was sobbing by the end of it. Loved it. The Great Alone, my favorite book by her. Homesteading in Alaska in the 70s. Who in the world would have ever thought I would be interested in reading about that? It was fabulous, and this one is no different. So this is a book about female nurses in the Vietnam War and what they went through. Our main character signs up, goes over there, and is completely shocked, by what the experience actually is. But that's not where the story ends. When she comes home, there's still like half of the book left. And it talks about the way that not only any soldier from Vietnam War was treated when they returned home from war, but particularly how the women and the nurses were treated. Because they were treated like they weren't even there. And, all the people that came home from Vietnam were, spit on and called names and stuff like that. And the book really goes into that. Now, this is not a topic, the Vietnam War is not a topic that somehow I ever learned much about in school. Like in high school, they never taught us about this. And I went to, I was in high school in the late 90s, early 2000s, but we didn't talk about the Vietnam War. I had an uncle that was in the Vietnam War who literally died of lung cancer, who we think possibly because of the Agent Orange he was exposed to, but nobody talks about it in the family, right? He never talked about his experiences. This was just not a thing that was talked about in my family. It's just not a thing I learned about. I learned so much from this book, but I also loved it. I also loved this journey, this experience, the characters. My God, they were incredible. I feel like I have talked about this book with so many people, and 98% of them absolutely adored it through the moon. And the other 2% liked it. So I haven't talked to anyone who disliked this book. Most people over the moon loved it. And I'm in that percentage too. I just thought it was really well written about a topic that I didn't know much about, didn't have much experience with. And she talks in the end about, the research and everything that went into making this. And so you get a feel of, what she had to do to learn about what happened here. And it's just, if you haven't read this book, maybe this is a book you keep hearing about and you haven't read it yet, please take my word for it. You have to read it. It's absolutely incredible. The Women by Kristin Hannah. So after that recommendation, you're like, oh my God, how can you even find 2 more books that were better than that? Well, again, this is my subjective list. I am totally biased on what I read and what I loved, what I didn't love. So maybe in your opinion, that is your favorite book, or maybe you read it and didn't like it, but that was number 3 for me. Let's find out about number 2. The Bee Sting by Paul Murray. I was convinced when I read this last January that this was going to be my number 1 book of the year. And for a good part of the year, it was. I fell completely in love with Paul Murray's writing as I lovingly stroked the book, right? I fell in love with Paul Murray's writing when I read Skippy Dies last year. That book tore my heart out. I loved every minute of it, every word of it. And I was so excited to start the year with his newer book, The Bee Sting. Now, I do want to say this is another book that is very character driven, okay? Basically, I'm going to tell you what it's about, and you're going to be like, I can't believe that this book is over 700 pages. It's a book about a family in Ireland who going through when the country of Ireland was going through a really bad economic downward spiral. It's a story about this family who was the father, the husband, the father owned a car dealership, a used car dealership. The wife was, a little bit hoity-toity, and their 2 kids, their son and daughter. And it is about their gradual fall from grace as things start to fall apart within their family and also without, like economically as well. So you're like, oh my God, how in the world did you read a 700-page book about this? So I just want to say again, character-driven book, right? It's a very long book. It's not going to be for everybody. I can understand that. It's very long. If you love stories about characters, if you love diving into families, particularly flawed families, I think there is much to love here. You get a point of view from one character, right? We get every single character's point of view. The father, the wife, the son, and the daughter. Each part of the story is told from their point of view, right? And you get to see how the story isn't really complete without these other points of view, because you hear the point of view from the wife and you're like, all right, I see how things are. And then you get the next one, you're like, oh, this is very different than what I originally thought. And then you keep going, you're like, oh, okay. And it leads to an ending that is so explosive, so insane, and so twisty and mind-blowing. I just need people to talk to me about this ending because I can't stop thinking about it. It's a genius ending. I think this book is phenomenal. It is very well written. Paul Murray is an astounding Irish author. He is so good. If you love character-driven books, if you love stories that are family narratives, please give this one a read. It's absolutely phenomenal. And when you understand the title and its correlation with the book, it's one of those awesome moments right there. The Bee Sting. Okay, so like I said, I was really anticipating that book. Nothing going to be able to top it this year. And then I read a book a couple months ago that I was like, I got done with it. I'm like, well, that's it. This is number 1. I love this book. I can wholeheartedly say that this was my favorite adult book that I read this year. And it is All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whitaker. Now, this is, again, another really long book. But please don't be put off by that if you're not somebody who generally likes long stories. You're going to want to sink yourself into every single page of this book. This book has so many different layers to it, and it's so many different genres. It is a family story. It is a love story. It is an adventure story. It's a thriller. It's a mystery. It's so many things. But primarily, it's a story about friendship. And it starts with these two kids, a girl and a boy. The pirate and the beekeeper is what they are known as, because the girl loves keeping bees. She lives with her grandmom, and her grandmom has taught her, the craft of beekeeping, and she keeps bees. And she becomes best friends with this boy who calls himself the pirate because he is missing an eye. It was a birth defect, and he wears a patch. Unexpectedly, inexplicably, they become best friends. Okay? So they become best friends. They're inseparable. Well, while they're still young, the boy, there is a killer going around who is kidnapping girls and murdering them. And when one of his classmates, he witnesses somebody trying to kidnap her, he intervenes and gets taken instead. And he's missing for quite a while. And the girl will not stop looking for him. Even when the boy's mother has given up, the police have given up, she knows her friend is still alive. And he is, and he comes back, and this might sound like a spoiler, but it's not, because this happens pretty early on in the story. He is obviously irrevocably changed, and it's the story of basically both of them and how they continue on from there. Because their paths go in very different directions. She becomes a police officer because of everything that she's seen, and he becomes a criminal, a fugitive, because he is now trying to track down, because when he was found, the killer wasn't found. So he is trying to find this guy because he believes a girl that he met while he was kidnapped is still being held captive by him. So it's this bit of a cat and mouse game between the two friends who are best friends, who are now on opposite sides of the law. There's so much more about this book. Like, it's got so many things in it, so many layers. Like I said, it is so well written, beautifully done. It is a story about hope. It's the story about family. It's a story about love and friendship. It is a story about everything and anything. And it is absolutely phenomenal. And I can't talk about this book enough. All the Colors of the Dark by Chris Whitaker. Well, there we go. Top 5 literary fiction adult books of 2024 that I read. Next week, we're going to be talking about some other genres also, but all of these books are available at Farmington Community Library. So if you are interested in one or more of them, please feel free to check them out. And also, like I said, please in the comments below, leave me some of your info. Tell me about some of the books you really love that you read this year, because I'm always looking for, more things to read and things to talk about with other people that are bookish related. Thank you so very much for watching, friends, and I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of the day.